Welcome everyone to the second ever virtual meeting of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Before we get started with the formal agenda for this afternoon's meeting, we're going to get some logistics on how we're going to proceed from our Director of Outreach and Intergovernmental Affairs, Yahaira Alvarez. Yahaira. Yahaira, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a few items ahead of today's meeting. In the chat function, you'll see some resources that Jahai will be sending out to you, including today's agenda, the monthly report, the presentations that we're going to be reviewing. How today will go is at the conclusion of each presentation, you'll hear a presentation from me about the CCRB process, a presentation from Haria about the findings of the youth report. So at the conclusion of those presentations, if you have specific questions to that topic, you can use the Q&A function and ask us, and we will try to get that answered for you. And then if you have anything else to say, any comments about police community dynamics, youth and police, that will be saved for the public session. We're going to keep a strict timeline of minutes. And if you do want to speak, you can use the raise hand function, which is found on the bottom right of your screen. If you click participants, which is on the bottom, that little blue circle with a face on it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us via chat. Thank you so much. Sorry, Mr. Davey, you're on mute again.
Before I begin my remarks and have the board members introduce themselves, we need to take care of one piece of housekeeping business, and that is to approve the minutes for of the last meeting. So is there a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And
all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
aye. Aye.
No. The ayes have it, the minutes are approved. So we're so glad that so many of you have joined us for this discussion about police community relations, an issue that is always important, but of course takes on particular significance in the midst of the conversations that have been happening nationwide and of course right here in our city. As I said, I'm Fred Davey, I'm the chair of the board. Before I get started, I'd like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. So we will start with Corinne English.
Hi, Corinne Irish, Memorial.
Sorry about that, Corinne.
Okay.
So please go ahead.
Sorry, Corinne Irish. I'm a mayoral designee.
Mr. Joseph.
Hello, good evening. My name is Nathan Joseph. I am a city council designee from Staten Island.
Ms. Pinsky.
I am Angela Pinsky. I am a mayoral designee and I am in Brooklyn.
Mr. Dwyer.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Dwyer. I am a police commissioner designee.
Mr. Rivadeneira.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Michael Rivadeneira. I am the Bronx City Council designee.
Mr. Freeman. I think you might be muted, Mr. Freeman. There you are.
Okay, Willie Freeman. I'm a police commissioner designee.
Right. Mr. Puma.
Good afternoon. I'm Joseph Puma. I'm the Manhattan City Council designee to the board.
Did I miss anyone? Any other board members?
Yeah, Fred John Siegel.
Sorry, John. Go ahead.
I'm John Siegel. I'm appointed to the board by Mayor de Blasio. We have this custom of introducing ourselves by how we were appointed, but I just want to make clear, because we have so many attendees today who may not have been to our meetings in the past. While I was appointed to the board by the mayor, I do not represent the mayor on the board. It's my view that we are we are an independent all-civilian board. And it's my view that I'm here to apply my own independent judgment and experience and knowledge in our cases. And in fact, in the 2 years at least that I've been on the board, I've not had any contact with anyone in the mayor's office about any matter before the CCRB. And that's, in my view, the way we do business. And I just want to emphasize that because we have a lot of new people. And I don't want to leave the impression that I at least am here representing the person who appointed me.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Thanks for that clarification. And I see Ms. Bond has joined us. And I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. My apologies for joining late. I'm Erica Bond, mayoral designee.
Okay. Anyone else that I miss? All right. Well, I thank you all. And again, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. We are meeting at a time of great unrest for our city and our nation. But make no mistake, the protests we now see in the streets of the United States and around the world have been building not for weeks or months, but for years and centuries. For us here in New York City, the tragic death of George Floyd in Minneapolis is a reminder that the death of Eric Garner is not an aberration. Those last words, "I can't breathe," echo today in ways that force us all once again to stop and think about the role of police. The videos force us all to consider the fact that before the advent of this technology, before cell phone cameras and social media, countless people whose names will never be in a headline or in a hashtag died senselessly and needlessly at the hands of police. Within the demonstrations we now see on the streets of New York is the spirit of Ferguson, the spirit of Selma, and the spirit of so many others who have stood before the status quo and simply said, "No more." Our eyes must be fixed now on moving forward. I know that that's the case here for us at the CCRB. Since these demonstrations began at the end of May, the CCRB has received more than 800 complaints related to at least 85 incidents. We are committed, as always, to investigating these complaints fully and fairly, regardless of whether any other entity investigates. I have seen numerous references to, quote, bad apples, unquote. But as we have witnessed, even one bad apple can cost a person their life if taken without justification and create turmoil and pain in communities and cities. We will vigorously adjudicate complaints against bad apples. But this is also a systemic problem. And the CCRB is committed to working with courts and advocates, everyday New Yorkers and others to engage this catalytic time in our history and to move us forward to a solution. At the state level, we have witnessed the passage of legislation to reform policing, most notably a bill to dismantle Civil Rights Law Section 50A and to bring transparency to New York's police disciplinary system. Anyone who looks at the progress that we've seen in the last few weeks and days and concludes that it happened by chance is sorely mistaken. This progress, much like the very existence of the CCRB itself, is the product of people exercising their all-American right to protest and demand better of their government. It's the product of advocates who for so long have been doing the work of pushing for change, and it's the product of lawmakers who acted in accordance with the will of their constituents. It is encouraging to witness a new generation of young people rise to the occasion As many of you may have seen, we are pleased to release a new public service announcement produced by the CCRB's Youth Advisory Council earlier this week. We will be playing that for you during this meeting. We also issued the first ever report on the relationship between youth and the NYPD. When you read that report, which shows that a vast majority of complaints involving young people involve young males of color, it can be easy to feel overwhelmed by what's happening in our city. But when you hear from members of our Youth Advisory Council, who will be speaking tonight, it restores your hope in the future. When you hear from someone like Errol Garner, who I know is here with us, who keeps us pushing and fighting despite having experienced unimaginable loss at such a young age, it restores that hope. When you see young Americans across the country who hit the streets fueled by nothing more than faith that surely we can do better than this, it restores that hope. Despite all the turmoil in our world, I have found reasons to be hopeful. And my greatest desire is that you all have too. Before I turn things over to John and acknowledge our guests, I want to again thank the CCRB staff for all they're doing to continue serving New York City, particularly during the last week. We've been presented with additional challenges on top of the challenge posed by COVID-19. I also want to thank all members of the public who are joining us this evening. We all have a great deal on our minds right now, so it means so much that you're here for a discussion about policing. I want to thank the board, and on behalf of our fellow New Yorkers, I want to thank all the city's essential workers who continue to go out and face COVID-19. And that includes members of the NYPD, who we are responsible for holding accountable for their conduct. I want to thank all of you who contribute to making this city a better city. I will now ask Yahaira Alvarez if there are elected officials' offices we want to acknowledge or elected officials themselves that we want to have speak at this time. Yahaira.
Hi, we want to acknowledge that Lieutenant Antonio Jimenez is here from the NYPD.
Would he like to speak?
Soren, can you unmute the lieutenant? Antonio?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I know you probably can't see me, but I'm trying to work on my camera here, but thank you for the invite. I believe my chief is maybe joining us, but I'll advise if she is. But yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Anyone else, Yahaira?
Yeah, we have Chief Nilda Hoffman as well from the NYPD.
Right. Chief Hoffman? Would Chief Hoffman like to speak? And Soren, are we unmuting her mic? Okay, why don't we proceed and we can come back to Chief Hoffman. Anyone else, Yahaira?
Yeah, we have Assembly Member Bishop in the meeting as well. Can you unmute her?
Assembly Member, would you like to speak? Assembly Member, are you there? Okay, we will come back to both the Assembly Member and the Chief. Anyone else, Yahaira?
And that's it for now.
Yeah, Ms. Alvarez, this is Lieutenant Jimenez again. I think she was answering, but I think her microphone is muted. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is the Chief's mic unmuted now?
Chief Nilda Hoffman.
We're checking with her right now.
Should we check with the Assembly member?
Assemblymember Bishop?
Okay, why don't we proceed with John's remarks and then we'll come back and see if we can pick them up after John speaks. Our Executive Director, Jonathan Bosch.
Thank you, Fred. I just wanted to echo your comments about the Mr. Floyd and the videos we've seen from across the country. From May 29th until today, the CCRB has received over 740 complaints related to the protests. Those complaints are about 129 separate incidents. The CCRB is determined and fully committed to investigating all the complaints we've received over the last 2 weeks. We are also in contact with the Attorney General's office and the Department of Investigation in an effort to ensure that our investigations do not conflict with each other. In addition, we've been in contact with several of the local prosecutors' offices. The agency will do its best to reach a thorough, fact-based, and impartial determination in allegations of misconduct reported to us. We will be as transparent as possible to ensure New Yorkers know there is an accountability for police misconduct. The recent decision by the First Department that allows the CCRB to commence investigations based on complaints from people who saw police misconduct over social media, in the news, and elsewhere has enabled civilians who may have experienced misconduct at protests to reach us more easily, and it brings the agency further into the 21st century. I just would like to give you all an update on agency operations. We intend to open our office next week to civilians who want to make complaints, but who may not have access to the internet or a telephone. If you have access to a phone or an internet and want to file a complaint, it's still the best way to reach us is to go to nyc.gov/CCRB complaint or 1-800-341-CCRB. Investigators are working remotely and conducting civilian interviews by telephone. Investigators continue to subpoena businesses and government entities. Member of service interviews, which typically happen in person, are currently scheduled to begin the week of June 22nd. The CCRB continues to work with NYPD to request and obtain documentary and video evidence. We are receiving documents and BWC about the events of the last 10 days. And I want to thank the members of the Internal Affairs Bureau and the Legal Bureau who've been providing us with that information. There's going to be a sizable backlog of for the agency to overcome with all these new investigations, plus the added difficulties of not being in the office. But after talking to staff, I know that they are committed to investigating these cases effectively and efficiently and making sure that justice is done. With regard to public comment later this evening, if you have a question or concern or otherwise wish to respond to something, please either raise your hand using the hand icon on your screen and wait to be called, or type your question into the Q&A section of the screen. And I want to thank all of our staff for continuing the operations, especially outreach for arranging this meeting, investigations for the work on the complaints, and everyone in operations and IT for keeping the lights on. And again, I'd like to thank the members of the public for participating in this meeting.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Dosh. We'll now return to Yahaira Alvarez, both to introduce the guests that we tried to get before, if they're available, and then to proceed with her report as the Director of Community Outreach and Intergovernmental Affairs. That's going to be followed by Jerica Richardson, who is special assistant to the agency and to the members of the board to proceed with questions that we might have after Yahira gives her presentation. So Yahira and then Jerica, please.
Thank you. So I think we fixed that issue. So Chief Hoffman, if you want to say hello.
Oh, hi, could you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this today. As you know, I am the Chief of Community Affairs here at the NYPD, and this is just a great opportunity, to hear from all and to hear, I mean, we know what's going on, and we hear. I mean, I've been hearing a lot from the community. It's been spending, the last couple of days, and I'm hearing what the community is saying. And I'm here really to listen and to provide back to the police commissioner many of the comments that I'm going to hear today. Yeah. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for coming. And Assemblymember Bishop.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Assemblymember Rodney Bouchard. I represent Central Flatbush, and I'm the chair of the Minority Women Business Enterprise. I am also the newly elected Democratic County Leader. So I do, work with the City Council in helping nominate a person on the board. I just want to say thank you for all your hard work. My first interaction with CCRB was I want to say it was around 2013 at Eastern Parkway, Caribbean Parkway, where Jamani Williams, who's a city council member then, got arrested, and we were with him. And I was interviewed by the CCRB in terms of what happened. We tried to capture the event back then. That's been some years ago. And I was part of the passing of a number of police reform bills. As you know, the repeal of 50A was a huge agenda for us, something that we negotiated back and forth. It involved CCRB. It involved talks about racial profiling, and I just want to let you all know that there were some concerns of having both a statewide racial profiling and a statewide 50A. They said one or the other. I was carrying the racial profiling bill because pretty much all parts of New York State still have racial profiling, and it's illegal right now. And as we're trying to refine just data collection and analysis, that was part of the big push to have police officers fill out the forms. And why it was important is because when Danny O'Donnell was on the floor discussing the changes in the repeal of the 50A bill, we talked about substantiated and what's not unsubstantiated. And for the first time, he told me that all the racial profiling case that was sent to CCRB were found unsubstantiated, and so there were 0 cases of racial profiling. It was a little bit disturbing to hear that. Again, I wasn't too familiar with the process. Obviously, as the county leader of Brooklyn, I'm heavily involved, and obviously with the recent actions that happened in here across the world and in Albany, passing the week on, I'm going to be more active. But now, as you know, the repeal of 50A, even if cases are not substantiated, it still will be made public so that we all can see. And we have the opportunity to appeal to make it substantiated. The racial profiling bill would also help with substantiating complaints, because we are also trying to look at data and in terms of how our police officers interact with civilians when they stop them. What was the length of the stop? Are they filling out the form? Was it arrest? Which is very different from the STAT Act. So, we're trying our best. We're still fighting. We know there's talks about reform, the CCRB again, very new to me. I am learning. I am here to listen to how you guys work. This was just a great learning experience, and I just want to make sure that we are doing the best that we can in terms of transparency and accountability. And when we hear cases, and I don't think anything happened with my case when public advocate was arrested, when they interviewed me, I think the civilians, they want to see outcomes. And so I'm happy that we're able to fix that part of the 50A where complaints now can be disclosed, whether they are substantiated or not substantiated. And, to a question to the board, and, you don't have to answer it now, but just to think about it. When we asked for a report on racial profiling and to say that there were 0 cases, that's a concern. And I don't know how the process was, but that's a concern. And I think that's why we need to certainly enforce by law to make sure that police officers, when they do stop, they fill out a form so that we have some data to work with. But I thank all of you for having an interest in being on this board and acting on the behalf of all of us, of the civilians. And I thank you so much for allowing me to speak. And I look forward to being at more meetings. If you have any questions on all the bills that we passed, the right to monitor, the special prosecution, the IG, the anti-choke bill, racial profiling, that's at one house, post 911, any of those and more. We had a few medical attention to people who are arrested or in the custody of law enforcement, the banning, I'm sorry, not the banning, the body cameras for state troopers. Please let me know. I was there. I'm a co-sponsor of all of these bills. I argued some of them, so I'm here to answer your questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. And just a word about the racial profiling issue. Racial profiling, and I'm going to ask John to speak to this as well, but racial profiling has not been an allegation type that the CCRB has investigated. And there's discussion going on now between a number of entities in the city as to whether or not it should become an allegation type that we investigate. John, you want to speak more to this? And you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the agency has been working with NYPD and City Commission on Human Rights to figure out the best way to investigate racial profiling. I think we can all have seen in recent weeks with the reports about disparate impact of social distancing enforcement that profiling is still an issue that needs to be addressed, and staff is working on finding ways to address it, and we hope to have something back to the board soon.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Darche. I think even before social distancing, racial profiling was existing. I think the issue that Mr. Assemblymember O'Donnell brought on the floor is that for many years before the social distancing, there were a number of complaints, and they were just found to be not substantiated. And again, I didn't know if this board took on allegation cases, but it was told that it would be 3 people appointed from the board, 1 from the mayor, 1 from the city council, and 1 from the police department, police commissioner. They would review that particular case to see if it was substantiated or not. And that's why I thought you all were involved in the number of racial profiling being substantiated.
Assembly member, we look at the individual cases of misconduct. So if a person were to feel that they were singled out because of their race and inappropriately stopped, we will look at the stop, but the larger question of whether there was profiling is done by the police department. And I believe the 600 cases that were investigated that not a single one was substantiated was done by the police department. And, CCRB is working with Commission on Human Rights, which the City Council in the charter has made the lead agency on racial profiling, and the department to try and find the best way to investigate these cases. And I think it's important that CCRB has a role in that too.
So yeah, just to emphasize again, so that the public is clear, and Assembly Member, we really thank you for bringing this up. Again, racial profiling is not an allegation type that CCRB investigates or adjudicates in any way. As John has said, if it comes up in an allegation, then we will deal with the part of that allegation over which the agency has jurisdiction or the board has jurisdiction. The profiling allegation goes to the NYPD. And we have been requested, I guess, over the last 3 or 4 months to look to see whether or not CCRB can itself investigate racial profiling. But I think it should be clear that it was not the CCRB who did not substantiate any cases in racial profiling. There's no jurisdiction there at the moment for the agency, but it was the NYPD where the jurisdiction currently sits.
Thank you so much for that clarification. That
Sure.
makes all the difference. And we would like the CCRB to take part in investigating racial profiling allegations. So that's certainly something. And even with filling out the forms, we know that most of the officers do not fill out the form. So I don't know if there's an enforcement part from the CCRB that could certainly recommend that. But again, we're pushing this to be a statewide thing. And as you can see, this is still an issue, everyone. It's still an issue. We passed all these bills. There's a lot more bills. You know, I have a bill where police officer is required to identify themselves. Because in some cases, in certain parts of the state, they're not required to identify their badge and all that stuff. I mean, there's so many other stuff, but racial profiling was an issue for the Senate. Okay? There were 11 bills. This was the only bill that was not passed. It's a problem. They do not want to collect the data. So I look forward to working with you because data will help substantiate and data would help AG to file a motion for injunction from me. Okay, so you need evidence to present your cases in the courts. So we can talk further. I certainly don't want to take all the time from the CCRB board and have an agenda, but again, thank you so much and thank you for clarifying this.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, and thank you for your interest, and thanks for all the work that you do in the Assembly as well, particularly on these issues that are really relevant to this agency, so thank you. Yahira, we have other, I think, elected officials who are now on the conference.
Yeah, we just want to acknowledge Senator Comrie and Councilmember Helen Rosenthal. Senator Comrie, do you want to say a quick hello or introduce yourself? I think he might have had another meeting. Councilmember Rosenthal?
Not quite. Oh.
Yes, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I just really am here to listen and to thank you for all the work you do. I mean, we're experiencing these protests and watching the police response and waiting to see what action NYPD will take. But your role is more important than ever. And I really appreciate, I'm here just to say I appreciate the work that you do, and anything I can do to be supportive, keep me posted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your continued support of this agency and its work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. If there are any other elected officials or representatives from offices, feel free to send me a message. I'm going to go ahead and start our outreach presentation to give those here just an overview of what we do here at the agency. Currently, we have around 232 participants, 264 participants, and we're really excited that you're all here for now. So, Soren, can you have me share my screen? Oh, I have it. Cool. All right, can everybody see that? John, can you see that?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so as you know, we are a city agency. We're independent from the NYPD. We are a agency composed entirely of civilians. We are the nation's largest independent oversight entity in the country. As the board mentioned, the board is composed of 15 members in total. 5 are appointed by the mayor, 5 appointed by the city council, 3 designated by the police commissioner, and 1 appointed by the public advocate. That public advocate appointee will be taking office and assuming her duties on July 6th. So although we investigate police misconduct, we don't have the authority to investigate all allegations of police misconduct. A way of knowing which allegations fall under our jurisdiction is by using the acronym FADO, F-A-D-O. The F stands for force. So any force used in interaction with a police officer falls under our jurisdiction, and we would investigate that to determine if it's excessive or unnecessary given the totality of the circumstances. And we would use guidelines provided in the patrol guide to determine that. In abuse of authority, that's a larger category. It includes improper stops, improper searches, a police officer inappropriately entering my house, a police officer refusing to provide his shield or badge number upon request, a police officer threatening to call ICE, etc. The D is discourtesy. So that means a police officer using inappropriate language like profanity or inappropriate gesture. And finally, offensive language. So this is language that inappropriately refers to my race, my ethnicity, my sexual orientation, my religion, my disability status. Those are allegations we take very seriously. In the other categories, there may be situations where a police officer may have had reason to stop me, but with the use of offensive language, that's something that is uncalled for. I wanted to touch base on the Right to Know Act. So this law went into effect in 2018. There are some major points that we really want all New Yorkers to know. One is that police officers are equipped with business cards. So those business cards have the police officer's name, command, and on the back some information on how to file a comment or complaint, calling 311. Police officers in a majority of situations must proactively give that card to civilians, but at any point, me as a civilian can always request that card. And if a police officer does not provide that card upon request, that would be something that we would investigate. Another thing that the Right to Know Act has empowered civilians in these interactions is with stops and searches. So if a police officer does not have the legal justification to search you, they must proactively ask you for consent. And inform you of your right to say no. If you feel that your right was violated, that you don't believe that the police officer was abiding by the Right to Know Act, please give us a call. Those are some mentions on it. So I know that in this time, a lot of offices are closed. For the time being, ours is one of them. So we want to make sure that if you feel that misconduct occurred, to please contact us. And there are multiple ways of doing that. You can file a complaint online, the website nyc.gov/CCRB complaint. We'll share the link in the chat. You can also call us directly, 1-800-341-0000. 2272 or CCRB, or you can dial 311 as well, go through the prompts, and that will direct you to our office. And because of a recent ruling, we are now able to, and empowered to investigate allegations that a civilian has witnessed on social media or any footage that they've seen. So if you've seen what appears to you as misconduct, please give us a call by filing that complaint online or by phone, and we will make sure to get back to you. Also in this time with virtual presentations, we have a team of 6 that is dedicated to going out to different communities virtually now, and when we proceed to different phases, possibly in person as well. But if you have any requests for a presentation, please email me or outreach at ccrb.nyc.gov, and we'll be happy to either join in on your virtual meetings or host it ourselves. And you can always follow us on at CCRB_NYC. And we're also currently on Instagram at the same handle, CCRB_NYC. So does anybody have any questions?
Any board members with any questions right now? We will go to the public a little bit later. Mr. Puma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Yahida, for your presentation. I wanted to also add that the agency was empowered with the charter revisions that were approved last fall to investigate false official statements made to the agency in the course of its investigations. I'm not sure when that quite goes into effect, but I wanted to sort of add to the FATO slide that you normally include in that presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. With untruthful statements, that is something that the agency is now empowered to investigate. So over the course of that investigation, over the course of that complaint, if we find that a police officer is providing a statement that's untruthful, that's something that may fall under jurisdiction.
Mr. Chair, can I add to something there?
Sure.
So the charter change gives the CCRB jurisdiction over untruthful statements made to the CCRB. So to change the acronym from FATO at this point would give the misimpression that people can bring allegations that someone made a false official statement in another venue other than to the CCRB. And so the staff is actively working at whether untruthful statements made to other entities could be considered an abuse of authority.
Mr. Dush, your camera's off, but that's fine for now.
Apologies.
No worries. Anyone else with questions, comments from the board? Again, we'll get to the public shortly. All right, so Yahira, is that the conclusion of your presentation?
Yes, just before you proceed, I just wanted to acknowledge that Sasha Clarida is here from Councilmember Denise Miller's office.
Great, thank you and welcome. Now we're going to turn to Jerica Richardson, who may have some questions from the audience on Yahira's presentation. Jerica. And you may be on mute.
Hi, thank you, Chair Davey. So we have our first question actually goes back to Executive Director's, I think, Darsh's remarks earlier. The first question comes from T. Payne. Does the NYPD provide body camera data to the CCRB at this point?
Yes, and we received our first body-worn camera footage today regarding incidents from the last 10 days. We've asked them to expedite them, and they said they will, and we're hoping to have more data soon.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Chiana DeBellis. There are two questions. The first is, what will accountability look like? And the second is, you say that police officers will be held accountable. Again, what will that look like? Executive Director Darsh or Chair Davey, can maybe you just give a quick overview of our process just to address the accountability question?
John, do you want to do that?
Sure. When we receive a complaint, we begin investigating immediately. We try and take statements from as many civilian witnesses as possible. We obtain as much video and documentary evidence as possible, both from including medical records or cell phone video or other surveillance video that may have captured the incident. We order police records and body-worn camera footage. Once we've obtained all of that information, we then schedule the member of service for an interview and interview the subject officer. Once we've obtained all that evidence, we marshal it, put it in a report, and it goes to the board, which generally meets in panels of 3 board members, 1 from each appointing body, and then they vote, and if misconduct is substantiated, they recommend a level of discipline that is sent to the police commissioner.
Thank you. Please proceed, Jerica.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Carmita Morgan Randall. The question is, how are the police processing youth, young adults with mental health diagnosis who are being detained and arrested? I know we are going to have a brief overview of our youth report coming up shortly. It may not address the entire question, but that we will have Haria Tarkan from our policy unit talking about youth. I don't know if the board or the executive director wants to address this question now, or if we want to hold it until we get to the youth section.
Why don't we hold it until we get to the youth section?
Great. The next question was from M. Joyce she asked, can we share Ms. Alvarez's PowerPoint? We will share Ms. Alvarez's PowerPoint. We're going to upload it online to our website and then also share the link in this chat. So if you just give us a few minutes, we can circle back to you on that. Our next question. How are you getting this information across to the average person? Yahira, can you jump back on to give us just a little guidance about outreaches, methods of, sharing how to contact the CCRB and about the work we do with the community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that with folks, especially in these times, it's a little harder to meet folks where they are. That's why these meetings are very important, and communication with New Yorkers is very important. So I have my email in the chat. Please email me of any opportunities that you come across or any students or even neighbors that you work with. We'll be happy to jump on and share this information. Historically, we've gone to community boards, schools, alternative to incarceration programs. We launched an initiative to meet folks where they are, as you mentioned. So Jahai led an effort to go to basketball courts, to soccer fields, and share that information directly with folks. We're always open to suggestions, and we really want to make this information as widely available as possible. Our comms team has expanded their efforts online. So our Instagram page just launched this week, so you can follow us there at CCRB_NYC, and a YouTube page as well. But we're looking for ways to really meet you where you are, so let us know.
Thank you, Yahira. Jerica, are there other questions?
We do have several other questions. The next comes from Malcolm Hill. The question is, who writes the patrol guide? Is that totally under control of the NYPD? If so, is that problematic when investigating excessive force? For example, city council members brought up there are many exceptions to the chokehold ban.
John, the NYPD is traditionally is the sole author of the patrol guide. In recent years, the portions dealing with stop, question, frisk have been under the review of a federal monitor as a result of the Floyd lawsuit. So it is, but generally speaking, the NYPD controls the patrol guide.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. We have a few more questions. I do want to keep us moving. I will read the questions that I currently have in our chat, but we have some other presentations that are coming up. And just to remind everyone, if you have a comment or something that's not related to any of the presentations, if you can hold that until our public comment section. And at that point, you can virtually raise your hand and we will call on everyone in the order that those hands are received. So the next question comes from Elisa Lerner. Given what FADO covers, how or why is it that racial profiling is outside of the scope?
I think that has to do with the history of what allegations the agency that would be under the agency's jurisdiction. I'm going to ask John to speak to this again. I think John mentioned that I think the charter actually places racial profiling to some degree with the Human Rights Commission and with the NYPD. But John, do you want to talk more about that?
I understand and share the questioner's puzzlement over why abuse of authority does not include racial profiling. It was that way when I got to the agency 7 years ago. I will say that racial profiling and all kinds of profiling are, in many cases, involve a much more significant level of investigation than what we are currently equipped to do right now. You look at individual incidents and see whether or not the member of service or members of service committed misconduct by what they did, whether they broke the law or violated the patrol law. And profiling is a much more sophisticated level of analysis because it may be that a member of service acted lawfully when they did something, but that members of service have a pattern in practice of enforcing the law differently for different groups, or that the way the law is enforced has a different impact. So you can't answer that question just by looking at an individual incident. So it would be a real lift for this agency to undertake those types of investigations. But as I said earlier to the Assembly member, I think it's something that we are working with our partners on figuring out if the CCRB has a role in those investigations and how we can take on that responsibility.
Thank you, John. I'll just say that expanded civilian oversight of the NYPD is clearly something it seems that many desire. And I think if that is the case, then the city has to be serious about the resources that it puts into this work. And it would only do the public a disservice for there to be a decision that the agency will have increased jurisdiction, and then the resources in order to carry that out don't follow. That is that is not serving the public well, if that's how we go about this. So I want to applaud the staff on being judicious in negotiations around whether or not racial profiling is a allegation, a form of allegation this agency investigates. But I think if it becomes the conclusion of the relevant bodies and public officials that the agency should, then the accompanying resources and support really have to be there. Otherwise, it really is a disservice to the public. Jerica?
One moment, please. So we have a question from Anali Sigobin. The question is, what are your opinions on defunding the NYPD and redirecting these funds to youth programs that are committed to Black communities?
So I think that there's a lot of misinformation. I think that the people are using defunding the NYPD to mean many different things. I'll speak for myself and not speaking for the board. I think we've heard from both the commissioner and the mayor and others that it is important to look both at what the opportunities are within the department to redirect some of those funds to some of the priorities that people have suggested, including youth services and related programs. My personal opinion is that there should also be some effort to look at whether or not the department is doing things that it doesn't need to do. And can those services be allocated to or assigned to the agencies of the city that might be better equipped to do them, and then the dollars follow. We'll have a full discussion of this, I'm sure, as these next weeks and months unfold. But let me open. If any of any of my colleagues would want to comment. Okay, so we will continue to have this discussion about what, quote, defunding of the NYPD means and how we should proceed as a city with regard to this. Jerica, any other questions related to your HIRA's presentation?
We have one additional question from Audra Jones. What authority does the police commissioner have to supersede or downgrade your recommendations?
Complete authority. Now, we work hard with the department to try to get concurrence on the disposition of the discipline that's recommended, but the final authority by law and statute and regulation on disciplining officers of the NYPD belongs with the commissioner. John, do you want to comment on this at all, or any of the other board members?
Fred Johnson, I have a question, but Darsh, go ahead first.
John Darsh.
So, sorry, Mr. Chair, there's a little disturbance over here.
Yes.
You were correct in that the police commissioner is the final arbiter. We now are notified when he gives us for his reasons, if the commissioner deviates on discipline in APU cases, which are the most serious cases, or in the non-APU cases, which include cases where, hey guys, cases where the CCRB has recommended either command discipline or training. And sorry for the disturbance.
It's understood. John Siegel?
Yes, I have a question. The 50A legislation passed late yesterday, and I think a number of questions about what its impact will be. The question I'm raising, and I don't necessarily expect anyone to be able to answer it off the cuff right now, but we do get memoranda communications from the department when the police commissioner downgrades our recommendations of charges. And my question is, what will be the public records impact of that with the repeal of 50A, and what level of disclosure of those memoranda will become public?
It's a very good question. In fact, I think with the charter change in November, anytime there's a deviation on anything, I think from command level up, if I'm correct, there's a written communication from the commissioners to block.
So the question is, will that now become public record?
Yeah, and I guess that we'll have to sort out. Thank you.
I have a Nathan Joseph. John mentioned the APU. I don't think many people in the public know what that is and what its function is. So it might be helpful, since he mentioned it, if someone could explain what our administrative prosecution unit is.
I'll take a stab, and then I'll turn it over to the experts. I think it was somewhere around 2013 when there was an agreement in a memorandum of understanding that the Civilian Complaint Review Board would be responsible for prosecuting charges and specifications against officers in a departmental trial. The best example of that the public will know would be the process that led to the firing of Officer Daniel Pantaleo, who was responsible for the death of Eric Garner. The CCRB brought charges, which is the highest charge that the agency can bring against Officer Pantaleo. That memorandum of understanding allows the CCRB to prosecute that case. That case is prosecuted by a unit within the CCRB that's named the Administrative Prosecution Unit, the APU. The prosecutors of the Administrative Prosecution Unit, the APU, prosecuted the case in a departmental trial, which is what the memorandum calls for before a trial judge. And of course, a guilty verdict came out of that with a recommendation for termination that the judge agreed with, that the commissioner ultimately agreed with, and Officer Pantaleo was fired. So that's the APU, at least as I understand it in layperson's terms, but I'll turn it over to the experts and see if they want to embellish or correct anything that's said.
I cannot embellish it, and I think there's someone who has to speak.
I'm sorry, John, say that again.
I can't do better than you just did, and I think we should see if Ms. Garner would like to speak.
Sure. Jericho.
My apologies. Our Q&A ran a little long, and Ms. Garner had to drop off. We'll check to see if she's able to join later, but she had to drop off at this time.
All right. So are we done with our Q&A on your high-risk report? We'll come back to more Q&A from the public shortly.
I think it makes sense for us to move on to our next presentation. Some of the questions that we have in the chat will still be relevant at that point.
Great. So we're going to hear then from, let me see, where am I here? We have a presentation on policy from our policy department on data. And I will turn it over to Haria Tarikan, who's our Senior Counsel of Policy and Advocacy. Haria.
Great. Thank you so much, Fred, Chair Davey, and I will go straight into my presentation. But before I do, I want to echo yours and John's sentiments about protests that we have seen over the last 15 days. It has been remarkable, particularly to see young people lead us into asking for a better future and a world that we all deserve. We at the CCRB have seen it personally from the young people in our Youth Advisory Council and the young people that we have worked with. And we are pleased to share our report findings with you, a lot of which came from a youth summit organized by our Youth Advisory Council. So I will begin by talking a little bit about what the Youth Advisory Council is, followed by what our youth summit was in 2019, and finally what led to the youth report. Our CCRB Youth Advisory Council is a council made up of young people from all across New York City, ages 10 to 24. They advise the agency on how best to engage other young people, and they help us coordinate events, create public information materials, and serve as community leaders and liaisons on social justice and policing issues. Our first class of the Youth Advisory Council helped us organize Speak Up, Speak Out, a youth summit on policing in New York City. This event, which was co-hosted by our partners at NYU, helped us bring together over 250 young people from all 5 boroughs to talk about policing issues, their suggested solutions, and then they were able to brainstorm with practitioners, academics, and others to think about how to make their solutions come to light. You can find more information about the summit and the program for the summit at the link below. My presentation is already up on the website for those of you who either want to follow along or want any of this information when I'm done. So we took the information from that youth summit and also looked at our complaints from January 2018 to halfway through 2019 to come up with the findings for this report. The key findings from the report is that about 83% of our complaints that involved young people were actually reported by adults. This was very important for CCRB to learn because that signaled to us that we needed to not only increase our outreach to young people, but suggested that potentially if an adult wasn't around, we would not have heard about these complaints that involved the young people. Most of our complaints, about 65% of our complaints, involved young males of color, young boys of color. And this is about 20% higher than young males of color that are representative in other CCRB complaints. We also found that young people of color were stopped for seemingly innocuous activities. And by that we mean activities like running, playing with sticks, high-fiving, and carrying backpacks. Finally, a large percentage of our complaints where we were unable to identify the officer, which is quite rare in CCRB complaints, involved plainclothes officers. And we also found that this was an issue because some young people's noncompliance with orders from an officer out of uniform was rooted in uncertainty about the officer's actual legitimacy. From the report and the data that we looked at, along with all of the information that we got from our youth summit, we were able to make recommendations for NYPD. One of those recommendations is that we believe the use of force data that NYPD publishes publicly should include age and race so that the public can know who NYPD is using force on. We also, in that same recommendation, asked for the NYPD to make the discipline recommendations and final discipline of school safety agents, who are the agents inside schools that are not under the jurisdiction of CCRB, but still interact with young people, public, and include that discipline in their reports about school safety agents. We also recommended that the NYPD consider the victims' ages when making penalty recommendations because we believe that misconduct, particularly against a young person, requires a second look to make sure that the penalty recommendation is appropriate. Finally, we found that there was not a lot of information about training that officers received between the difference between policing adults and policing young people. And so we made that recommendation for all officers, but particularly for officers that are being trained as a part of NYPD's new youth initiative, which includes youth coordination officers. Speaking of that initiative, we ask that the entire report be taken into account by the department when shaping this new initiative, as we want to make sure that young people all over New York City, and particularly brown and black young people, are not over-criminalized by the NYPD. Finally, we asked for the NYPD to strengthen the requirement for officers to notify parents or guardians when young people are brought into the police precinct and processed for arrest. We are happy to report that in NYPD's public response to our report, they have accepted all of our recommendations and are working to implement them. The youth report, like our other reports, can be found on our website at nyc.gov/CCRB reports. And for more information about this report or any data policy questions you might have, you can contact us at policy@ccrb.nyc.gov. With that, I am happy to take any questions that Jerica may have received during the course of my presentation.
Thank you, Haria. While Jerica is looking at those questions, let me ask the board members if they have any questions or comments on the report. Okay, Jerica, any questions from the participants? And Jerica, both your mic and your camera are off.
I'm back.
Great.
So we do have some questions from the participants. It looks like all of these questions are holdovers from some of the earlier conversation. So if we can try to move through these, because I know we're going to have some speakers that are related to the youth report from our YAC.
So Jerica, let me ask if we can go ahead and move to the next report, since that involves the YAC, correct?
Correct. So if Haria could share her screen, and we're going to play our PSA, and then we will allow speakers from our YAC, our Youth Advisory Council, who contributed to the report in some way, as well as the PSA, to speak. And then we can save these questions for after that portion, because we'll be going into public comment.
Great, that's perfect.
So before the PSA, I would like came out with a report on Monday. I just want to say that this public service announcement was really a labor of love by our city. We started on this project at the top of the year, and back then we were still explaining to our YAC what a PSA was. And since that time, it's been a joy to see these young members work so hard and really put their all into this and into making sure that young New Yorkers like themselves are able to know about the CCRB and work with the CCRB. Their level of commitment has really been outstanding, and we want to thank them. I'm going to say their names very quickly, but Thomas, Aliyah, April, Issa, Nusrat, Kayla, Shania, Jamari, Leah, Charles, Anwar, and Elias. This couldn't have been done without you. Also, thank you to the production company Never Whisper Justice, John Thomas and Chad Williamson, who worked with us. And finally, of course, Emerald Garner, we want to thank for making this happen. I will share my screen now, and here is our PSA.
It's supposed to be like any normal day. My friends and I just finished playing basketball. We didn't realize there was an officer behind us, and when we saw him, we pulled to the side to let him pass. He got out of his car. He shoved us against the fence and asked us questions like, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And I didn't know what to do. I just told him we were playing basketball and I was heading home, but he didn't believe me. He ended up putting us in handcuffs, put us in the car, and took us to the precinct. My mom told me to call the CCRB. I called them, filed a complaint against the officer, and they turned my complaint into an investigation.
Police misconduct affects us all, and my family experienced it firsthand. My name is Emerald Garner. the daughter of the late Eric Garner, and the CCRB was there for both me and my family. The agency launched an independent investigation, prosecuted the officer, and ultimately he was fired. The CCRB is an important resource for all New Yorkers, especially young people. If you encounter police misconduct, call the CCRB.
Every New Yorker has a right to be treated with respect during an encounter with the NYPD.
I feel like that right has been violated at any time or any place.
Report it to the CCRB.
And we're working to get this message out to young people. Police misconduct affects all of us. And we want you to know that the CCRB is here for you.
The agency investigates police misconduct by the NYPD, so call them and report.
And we still have a long way to go in improving police interaction with young people.
But the city is committed to involving us in the conversation and making sure young people are a part of the solution.
Thank you. Let me just say before we hear from the young people, I want to just say that I had a chance to attend the youth summit when it happened now many months ago, and I've been able to witness firsthand this process that has gone into the making of this PSA. Commitment, young people over the course of this. Thank you. And so I want to thank them for their really dedication to doing this, not just for themselves, but on behalf of all the young people of the city of New York. So Aria.
We agree. We had a really great time working with the YAC members. And moving on to the community group portion, we are going to be hearing from YAC members from this year and last year. First off, we're going to hear from Aaliyah Davenport, who is our YAC class of 2020. Soren?
Sorry, Aaliyah's computer just shut down on her. Can we move her to the end of the list?
Yeah, no problem. Jamari Lewis.
Hello, I'm Jamari Lewis. I'm part of the PSA, and I am part of the YAC. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you for allowing me to speak in this meeting. And at first, when I first joined the YAC, I wasn't very educated on what's going on today and all these issues, but hearing my friends who were a part of the YAC talk about all these issues made me become interested and want to learn more on how I can make it better and how can we improve. This would be a great opportunity for me, and I knew that since we're in a time of trouble that I could voice out and allow people to know that they have support behind us and themselves too. And as you know, with everything going on today with the police and our interaction with them, and we are just seeking justice for this. And a couple ways we could probably seek justice for this is improving the interaction with police, like allowing them to interact with us in a non-enforcement environment or situation. This could allow people to have a better connection, understand that the police is there for us and hope for the better for all of us. And this is just couple of many ideas that's out there in improving the police interactions with us, and we could avoid misconduct with the police. And to know that we have the CCRB behind us is great, and know that we could improve our communities is a goal that we're striving for.
Thank you, Jamari. Let's see if any of the board members have any questions for Jamari. All right, we will go to Yahira.
All right, we have Aaliyah Davenport is good to go. She's also from our class of 2020 who helped create this PSA.
Yo, what you want from me?
Hello, Leah.
I don't believe she's ready yet.
Okay. All right, no problem. So we're going to go back a year to our 2019 class. We're going to hear from Christopher Mitchell. He was the class of 2019. And we'll just wait a second for Soren to cue that up.
Hi. Hi, I'm Christopher Mitchell. I am the class of 2019 of the CCRB Youth Advisory Council. And as a member of the Civilian Complaint Review Board's Advisory Council, I would like to reflect on my enriching and valuable time at the CCRB, in which we had a youth summit to speak out on police brutality and law enforcement issues. I've been blessed with amazing leaders and world changers to stand beside me in this ongoing battle for peace and justice. And I'm truly grateful for the knowledge I have acquired and the insatiable hunger for justice that I've amassed through the CCRB Youth Advisory Council's Youth Summit and our highly productive meetings. Secondly, I'd like to reflect on growing up as an African-American male within the 5 boroughs of the city. I've witnessed the horrors and injustice that have been occurring far too often in America and New York, and I will not tolerate it. I've been given a voice for a reason and a life for a reason, meaning that I should use both to advocate for true equality. I am saddened by the horrific murders of innocent Black Americans such as Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and many others whose names go unknown, while their lives aren't any less valuable and relevant for this cause. All of these citizens were innocent until proven guilty in a court of law with due process, yet they were tried, convicted, and executed in their streets and in their homes. I know that it is time for this generation to stand up and realize its true power to fight for equality and the well-being of our people. We are part of the change we've been waiting to see, and it's time to let our voices be heard in this fight for justice. And I'm once again grateful to be part of the CCRB's Youth Advisory Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Any comments or questions from the board members? Thank you. Yahira, do we have other Youth Advisory Council speakers?
Yes, we have Jagger Helfand, and then after that we'll hear from Aaliyah.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. My name's Jagger, and I was part of the YIC in 2019. I first decided to become a member after I experienced the same perspective shift that most kids go through and started to fear the people that are supposed to protect me. And being a member of the CCRB Youth Advisory Council was an incredible experience. I met others who are extremely passionate about improving police-community relations. My voice was heard, and I was empowered. All of the actions that the CCRB has taken concerning youth outreach are incredible, and I believe that continuing and strengthening this outreach is a critical part of the solution to make change, improve relations, achieve social justice, and ensure that all citizens feel safe. Probably one of my favorite parts of being a member of the Youth Advisory Council was planning and attending the first Youth Summit. Listening to the voices of NYC's youth was empowering and justified that we are here to improve our city, the police department, and to make a change. Attending the summit made me and other attendees hopeful, knowing that our voices had been heard. My peers and I have many ideas about actions that we need to take. I think that the CCRB should continue with outreach, especially at a time like this, when so many people are empowered to fight for change. A subject that came up a lot during our meetings was that not enough of NYC's youth know about the CCRB and the resources available to them. And the Youth Summit and public service announcement that this year's Youth Council have had huge strides, and I think the CCRB should possibly further partner with NYC Public Schools to further the message, open up more job or involvement opportunities for youth, such as summer virtual internships, and offer writing platforms where youth could submit ideas. I know that myself and many peers have been looking for ways to get more involved with criminal justice reform, protesting the Black Lives Matter movement. Personally, I've been unable to attend protests due to my family's concerns about the current pandemic, and despite this, I've been trying to use my voice. In addition, I have multiple friends who have even run away from home in order to protest and that I know would like to get involved. Finally, I just want to briefly state that I support the sentiment of my peers' statements that the police system may be corrupt beyond reform and that the institution is violent and unjust. And regardless of individual beliefs, I think that it is increasingly important for the CCRB to continue to hear the voices of the youth and to integrate our voices into the mission to recommend needed action. Thanks.
Thank you, Jagger. Board members, comments, questions? So I want to thank, we have one more. Yahira?
Yes, and thank you so much, Jagger. That was really great. and Chris and Jamari. Those are really powerful statements. Last but not least, we have Aaliyah Davenport on from our 2019 class.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Just want to say it's an honor to speak on this, especially on these troubling times. I know it's very hard for everyone, and I just want to share my perspective on everything that's been happening. So when I first heard and saw what happened with George Floyd, to be honest, my reaction was just like so numb because it's something that we see on a daily. We see innocent Black lives being lost, and we see many officers walking away without punishment. And I feel like as a youth, sometimes we're in this like state of helplessness where it's like, okay, what can we do? Like, how can we use our political rights? How can we use our voice to advocate for our pain in our community? And at first I struggled with that until YAC, which really, really helped me this year with even reaching out to like my school, reaching out to people in my community to be active in what's going on. So I just want to give like a thank you to them. And like this year, we were able to work on a PSA to promote CCRB, as you guys seen. And honestly, I was even able to share it to my school, and they were able to share to more schools. And like even something little like that, it was slowly bringing change. And I feel like in times like this, it's so hard to see how can we make a difference? How can we start changing a system that was made to oppress us in the beginning? And I feel like to me, it really starts with us generation, like bringing up youth in the right way, like letting us know we can advocate for our voice, letting the police be accountable for their action, and making sure that we have the right relationships between police officers and the community. Because I was talking to one of my friends, and you know, there's many cases in like communities where you have their over policing, but then you also have police officers that build a communal relationship with the people so they can trust it. There's no violence. There's like a kind of mutual understanding, if you understand what I'm saying. And I feel like that's very important because yes, we can be angry, we can be frustrated, but we also have to try to find a state of, okay, what's next? How can we go forward? How can we bring positive change? How can we not just lead further into chaos and destruction? And I know it's a big statement to put out there, well, honestly, in my opinion, it starts with the little things, and it really starts with the youth. And I just want to thank YAC for continuing to do what they do, and CCRB to continue to reach out to the community because there's so many people that need to hear this. So many people need to know that we're there for them and that they have a voice when they feel like their rights are being violated. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Alia. Thanks to Jagger and Christopher and Jamari. Thank you for your leadership, your commitment, and your dedication. And I hear future CCRB board members, mayors, city council members, legislators, and then maybe even a president or two within your number. But I want to thank you for your leadership. And I hope we can continue to have these conversations about how to be most responsive to young people, particularly when it comes to policing, and particularly when it comes to what CCRB can do to try to improve the relationship between young people and the officers who have sworn to serve them. Any other comments from any of the other board members?
Yes, Chair Davey.
Sure.
This is Nathan Joseph. I echo everything you said. You beat me to it, but I'm glad that you said it because you related it better than I could. The YAC has really impressed me. I'm impressed and I'm heartened by their passion and their dedication. Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Mr. Riva Denara.
No, I definitely echo both you, Chair, and Nathan. It's energizing to hear our youth speak in this way, especially, you know, in this time, and it just, you know, gives me hope. And I want to say thank you to all the YAC classes, both classes, for all the work that you contributed to this document. It was a hard document to read, just to read some of the experiences that were annotated in the report, but your stories that you shared and the PSA that was created out of this are, you know, necessary for us to understand that we need to do an investment in our youth rather than seek to just use measures of law enforcement against our youth. We should trust our youth. Our youth are definitely our future leaders. So I say thank you to that. And I want to just mention, since we have elected reps here and elected officials on this particular meeting, that to take a look at the recommendations, because I do believe for the CCRB to do some of the things that are being recommended, we need some policy changes. So please look at the recommendations and please take strong consideration for what our youth are saying, because they are the ones that live through this, and we should be listening to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivadeneira. Other comments? Ms. Irish, I'm going to do it right this time. Corinne.
Thank you. I just wanted to say this is why you can feel hopeless and hopeful at the same time in these moments, because of how impressive you guys are, the members of our Youth Advisory Council are, and you inspire us, and you certainly give us hope that the things that have gone on for decades, and some of the abuse and the things that we have tried for many long years to get past and to improve are actually going to change. So thank you so much for your efforts.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Mr. Puma.
Yes. It's hard to follow so many powerful and eloquent statements, but I just wanted to extend my congratulations and just words of my feeling of inspiration by the members of the Youth Advisory Council. I had the privilege of meeting the 2019 class upon their graduation, and by a fluke, I was able to meet the 2020 class the day before the filming of the PSA. So I recall some of the nerves that were in the room, but I have to say the PSA, turned out fantastic. And I believe, and I said that at the time when I stepped into their meeting, that this was going to be a really valuable contribution, not only to the agency, but to other youth in the city. And I just wanted to echo that. And I hope that these youth ambassadors will continue to remain involved, and just keep in mind that, it's young people that really do push social change. History shows that, and young people are in the majority at the protests. And so I just want to urge you to continue to stay involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puma. All right, we will go then to our public comment. And again, I want to thank Jamari and Christopher and Jaga and Aliyah for presenting to us. Yahira, is that the conclusion of the report?
Yes. So moving on to the public session, if you want to speak, just use the raise your hand function. It's found on the right-hand side of your screen. If you hit the bottom button with the blue circle, you'll see the raise your hand function. Before moving on to the public session, the public portion, I do want to acknowledge that Takoya Jones from Councilmember Francisco Moya is here, as well as James Thomas from Manhattan Borough President's office. So with the public portion, I know that Jordan Woke had something to say. If Soren, can you unmute Mr. Woke?
It's like someone is sharing the screen.
Yeah, so Sonia is going to be sharing the screen with the timer on it. We just want to reiterate, we want to hear from as many people as possible. given the time. So really stick to the 2-minute time frame. The 2-minute clock will be shown on the screen. Thank you in advance.
Am I unmuted yet?
We can hear you, Mr. Woke.
Okay. How will this PSA reach the target audience?
Harvey, do you want to address that?
I can also take that, Chair Davey.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Wook, for your question. So we have not only increased our social media presence to Instagram and YouTube, share this with the young people, but that is really where we are leaning on our YAC. They have done a great job of getting this shared by their schools. We have reached out, our outreach team has reached out specifically to several schools and youth programs, shared directly with. We've already seen this shared by several schools across the city. And I know that at least 1 or 2 of our Youth Advisory Council members have made sure that it is on TikTok, Snapchat, and all platforms that young people are using. We were very deliberate about making sure that this could be shared as widely as possible and on any and every platform that young people use. We, of course, always are open to hearing more suggestions, but we are making a targeted effort to reach social media, to reach kids through their schools, and to reach young New Yorkers where they are and not wait for them to come to us or our social media platforms to see this PSA.
I look forward to seeing the statistics on liking and sharing.
Great, and we would love for you to share it too, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you. Other speakers?
Great. Now we'll be hearing from Anjali C. Gobin, followed by Dov Markowitz. So Anjali?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so my name is Anjali, and I just wanted to thank everyone for their commitment to ending police brutality. But with the recent murder of George Floyd and countless other Black people that go unnamed, I feel it's imperative that we as a community stop attacking innocent people based off of their race. I call for more representation for Black people in our communities and more funding redirected from the NYPD to organizations in support of Black youth. As a community that is also highly underrepresented, it is important to educate the youth and the people of their rights and voting rights. With the 2020 census, we need a call for action to represent people of color communities and vote for officials that will represent our needs and desires. We need to end this racial injustice and hold those accountable for continuing it. I also want to emphasize the unnecessary actions of the police force known as broken window crimes or minor crimes. I believe the role of the police officers needs to change as well as their relationship with their community. In recent days, a police officer in Brooklyn reenacted the murder of George Floyd upon a protester, and his fellow officers were in support of him. Overall, I believe the power that police officers exhibit must be limited and given to the people who are most affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
So much. So Dov Markowitz, followed by Charlotte Pope and Gregory Antonillo. So Dov?
Thank you. Along with expressing solidarity for the other speakers, I wanted to ask 2 specific questions from the most recent monthly report. First, it looks like 43% of body cam requests for footage are more than 90 days pending. I was wondering if you could comment on that. And then the second, under dispositions or case abstracts, it sounds like the preponderance of the evidence for a case weighs against the complainant. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. Specifically, there's an unsubstantiated claim where 2 civilians were stopped by 4 officers who claimed that they were frisked and searched. None of the officers turned on their body cam footage, and the ruling was that the CCRB was unable to determine what happened by a preponderance of the evidence. I'm curious why the burden isn't on the officers to refute the charges. Thanks very much.
Thank you. John, do you want to take those? Mr. Darsh.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Still getting used to the unmute. With regard to the initial question about body-worn camera footage, shortly, early this year, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the police department that would have set up a viewing room and a process for identifying body-worn camera footage that would have greatly reduced the backlog. It also, while we've been able to implement some parts of that memorandum of understanding, the part that would have let us view footage simultaneous to the department while they were doing the search, and also have investigators analyze it prior to it being redacted, has not been able to be implemented because shortly before we were about to start working on a secure room, we began working from home due to the pandemic. So it is one of the priorities with the hopeful return to the office that we will be able to get that moving again. That being said, we have gotten cooperation from the department about the incidents most recently, and they're trying to get us the footage on that on a rolling basis as soon as they can. And it is we're hoping to overcome the difficulties just by being persistent and persevere through the struggle. With regard to preponderance of the evidence, generally speaking, in American law, the person who is making the claim has the burden on that. The burden on the civilian in this case is not beyond a reasonable doubt. Is that they don't have to prove things to a certainty. They only have to prove it to a preponderance of the evidence, which is slightly more than 50%. So if you get to 50% and are a little bit over, that is that is preponderance of the evidence, and the burden has been met, and the allegations should be substantiated.
Thank you, John. More speakers.
Mr. Chair, can I speak on both of those issues?
Absolutely, Mr.
First off, the COVID crisis has obviously interrupted a lot of the work of this agency, as you know, across society and the economy. I don't know when it's going to end, how it's going to end, and to what extent there's going to be a continued reopening. And I think the public should know it has, in one way that it has interrupted our work, is that my understanding is there have been no interviews conducted of members of service in our investigation since mid-March. That's not a decision made by the CCRB, nor is it a directive of the NYPD. My understanding is that has occurred basically because of the real impediments to doing things, plus a resistance by attorneys in the process to engage in virtual interviews. And the executive director knows I've been a pest about this, and arrangements are being made to try to do interviews in person when the office reopens. I just want to urge publicly that the agency be utilized to the maximum extent necessary virtual technology for investigative interviews, and that to the extent that we continue to receive resistance by counsel to producing their clients for witnesses, we're going to need to wave the red flag on that and seek assistance from people with authority to make that happen. Other city agencies are conducting investigative interviews. virtually. Bail and arraignments are happening in all the courts across the city constantly, virtually. Bail hearings, all sorts of other legal proceedings. That actually is the new normal, and we're going to have to insist on cooperation in that regard. In terms of the preponderance of the evidence, my own approach to these cases is there is no burden of proof. And there's certainly not a burden of proof on a complainant in a CCRB case. When we have cases where there's a he said situation and just difference of facts between a complainant and a respondent officer, I know what I do, and I think all the board members do, is to review the entire record, look for corroborating evidence, look for a video if there is, other circumstances that allow us to make a determination as to whether it's 50.1% or 49.9% in terms of substantiation. And I don't believe there's a presumption, there is, I think that's a matter we should discuss. That's not how I've been approaching these cases, nor do I think that's how the most or all of the board members approach them.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, can I clarify one thing?
Sure, Mr. Darsh.
I just want to make clear that while the agency hasn't been,
Mr. Darsh.
while the agency hasn't been conducting member of service interviews, we have been conducting civilian interviews this whole time, as well as doing other investigative work.
Thank you.
I appreciate the clarification, which maybe better identifies the source of the problem.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from board members?
All right, Nathan.
Mr. Joseph. Yes.
Yeah. I agree with Mr. Siegel. I don't put the burden on the complainant to prove anything. They make the complaint, and then we look at all the available data and decide whether there's enough evidence to support the claim of misconduct or not. The complainant doesn't have to bring anything to the table other than the complaint.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Other comments, questions? All right, so our next speaker.
Before going to our next speaker, Charlotte just wanted to acknowledge that Neighborhood Benches and the Brooklyn Adult Learning Center is also in attendance. So thank you so much for coming. Charlotte?
Based organization engaged in youth organizing and advocacy. We've strongly opposed the new youth policing strategy since its announcement, so we agree that this report comes at an important time, and we thank you for bringing transparency to these really egregious cases. With the first recommendation for the department, we'd ask for disaggregated data to include gender, as we've seen in other reporting that Black and brown girls and non-binary youth of color are disproportionately impacted by policing. Then we know in the board's monthly reports in the closed cases section of the appendix, uniformed officers with school safety are parsed out as a miscellaneous command, and we'd ask if youth coordination officers or even NCOs could also be broken down as a unique kind of policing. Perhaps also in the annual report, the characteristics of officers can be broken down further. Otherwise, we ask for some creative ways to bring some long-term transparency to youth policing. We feel it's important to offer some more context around the work to limit policing in schools and clarify that the 2019 organizing named in the report did not call for more counselors than cops, but rather called for counselors not cops. The report also framed the MOU between the NYPD and DOE far too generously. To be quick, the amendments to the MOU included language deferring to the discretion of police, undermining the MOU's potential impact. That same critique exists for the patrol guide revisions on school-based policing. And lastly, just to be clear, the MOU is just a document. It does not include the things that were listed, like it did not create restorative justice programs. All of those other reforms happened independent of the MOU and largely absent the NYPD's involvement. So thank you again. We really appreciate this work and your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the speaker's presentation?
Yes, Chair Davey, can I respond, please?
Thank you so much.
Much, Sonia, for your comments. I would love to talk to you more about your recommendations for our reports. Our general email is policy@ccrb.nyc.gov. Mine specifically is htarekegn, TAREKEGN, @ccrb.nyc.gov. But I do want to say that we are looking into tracking both NCOs and YCOs separately. So that is something that the agency is already considering. As to the issues that you noted in the report, we did not mean to speak about make a judgment on the MOU. We were simply noting that it existed for context, but thank you so much for bringing those issues up during this meeting.
Thank you, Aria. Any other comments? So our next speaker.
Before going to our next speaker, which is Gregory Antonillo, I would like to just acknowledge that Lena Chen from Assemblymember Brian Barnwell's office is here today, and Michelle Hernandez from Councilmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also here. So Gregory.
Hello? I'm here. I can hear
you. Go ahead.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for a public presentation. I just happened to see it and was very curious to attend and listen. I think that some of the explanations given for not completing certain investigations on the COVID crisis are a bit too convenient, because when I looked on the CCRB website, the latest annual statistics, and I didn't look at the most recent monthly report, I'll admit, said, did not indicate what percentage of claims were sustained, and I believe that's the right word, indicated. But I had to go through the total number of complaints and the total number of sustained complaints over the past 5 years before 2018. And I did the math twice. And it was 0.5% in which you sustained complaints brought by public. And if I'm wrong on that, I'd like to know. But that seems to me to be a very, very high burden, much more than the preponderance of the evidence. And I cannot understand it. So while I appreciate the aims of the CCRB, it doesn't seem to me like it's doing any good. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. John, do you or anyone else, maybe someone from the policy unit, want to?
Sure. I think if you look at our full investigations, roughly 20% of our full investigations result in a substantiation. So, and if you think that slightly less than half of our cases are fully investigated because of the requirement for a sworn complaint, that makes 10% of the complaints made by civilians get substantiated, which is it is not 1%. It's not less than 1%. It is 10%. I'm taking what Mr. Joseph and Mr. Siegel said about there not being a burden, but one of the things that we have to do in order to substantiate allegations is show that the preponderance of the evidence shows that the event occurred, that it is the right member of service, and that it was misconduct. So if you look at another section of our cases is that we are exonerating police work because of the events that the civilian said did occur. The patrol guide and the law allow them to. And the CCRB does not make the law and does not write the patrol guide. We interpret these things. So I think that also might account for the numbers being what they are. I think it is important to note that since the widespread implementation of body-worn cameras, the substantiation rate has gone up, especially for complaints, allegations involving discourtesy and threats, because we now have audio with a lot of the situations. And so we are able to determine that, yes, discourtesy was used, or yes, there was an inappropriate threat made, and can substantiate those allegations.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right.
Mr. Davey, this is Nicole. Nicole Napolitano, Chair of Policy and Advocacy. I just wanted to jump in and reiterate the email address that Aria had given earlier, policy at ccrb.nyc.gov. Anyone who's interested in talking more about our data and how these numbers are derived and where our data comes from, I would love to talk more with, and so folks can feel free to email us there, and we can help walk you through exactly how those numbers are calculated and exactly what the percentages are.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Anyone else? All right, our next speaker.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So the next speaker that we have is Hannah Coleman, followed by Jarrett Cato and Justin Agramonte. So Hannah?
Hi, everyone. I have a question actually in two parts. So for background, I'm actually a former CCRB investigator myself back in the mid-2000s. So I understand intimately how challenging that effectively investigating complaints can be when you're overwhelmed with a particular volume. So the first part of my question is, what have the effects of COVID-19 been on the agency's ability to complete investigations and to close cases? I know that we've already talked about no MOS has done an interview in 3 months. What kind of backlog has that created that investigators are now going to have to struggle to overcome once those interviews are completed? And the second part of my question is, taking into account those inevitable delays on top of what is an avalanche of complaints over the last few weeks resulting from the protests, what is the CCRB doing, and does the CCRB even have the ability to take the steps that you think are necessary to ensure that these complaints are going to be investigated in a quick and efficient way? Again, as someone who's done this job, I know that it's becomes exponentially more difficult to come to an affirmative finding. So a substantiation or an unfounding rather than an unsubstantiation. As weeks and potentially months go by after a complaint is filed and people's memories fade and statements become less consistent. And things I'm particularly interested in knowing, is there approved overtime for investigators? Can you do that? Can you get increased? What are the concrete steps that effectively and with the time they deserve?
Sorry, Hannah, you cut out in that last part. Can you repeat that last part?
Sure. Just saying, particularly, specifically, is there approved overtime for investigators? Is there increased funding for hiring additional people or getting extra help? Kind of what are the concrete steps that the agency is taking or would like to take to ensure that these complaints are investigated efficiently and effectively?
Thank you. John, do you want to take that one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the while the agency hasn't conducted interviews of members of service, investigators have been working very hard to conduct work from home. And it is difficult. People have been going above and beyond to get their work done. But with regard to fully investigating cases, the fact that some of the steps we've taken during the pandemic to conduct virtual interviews with civilians may actually cause the full investigation rate to increase. And that is going to cause additional workload for investigators. The charter reform that was passed last year was supposed to, at the end of this month, cause our headcount to go up by, OMB had originally calculated 17 investigators. When the initial financial implications of the pandemic came in, the Office of Management and Budget asked us for PEG, which means like, how are we going to cut they asked for a 5% reduction in our budget. And we because there was a hiring freeze, decided to give up our new bodies and also not hire for the people who had left. We had approximately 10 investigative positions that that were unfilled at the time that we were going to need to fill. And it would have made things extremely difficult without the events of the last 10 days. We've since gone back to the Office of Management and Budget, made a request to at least hire up to our current headcount, and we're waiting to hear back. They asked some questions about how we would train people while we are in a work from home situation. We've answered those questions, and I'm hopeful that there will be success on that front. With regard to overtime, I think we have to be careful not to overburden people. And so if investigators want to work overtime, we will make it available. But I don't want to impose mandatory overtime when, frankly, people are already very stressed. And so we need to make sure that the burdens of doing the job are not, we don't burn people out.
Thank you, John. And let me also say that I've been heartened, and we'll have to stay with this process to see a number of city council members publicly state that they are committed to ensuring that the funding is there so that the agency can carry out the mandates of the charter revision that were voted in November. And a couple of city council members are actually on the record in the newspapers over the last couple of days having taken that position. And we've had a couple at our last meeting, at least one who also stated it. So we're going to work with those council members and anyone else to ensure that the agency gets as many resources as it possibly can to be able to do the job that now sits before it. To our next speaker.
Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from Justin Jarrett Cato. Then Justin Agramonte and Nicole Palencia.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I first want to say thank you to the board and to the youth. That was an excellent presentation, and I got to watch your last month's meeting, so I got a little bit more versed in what you guys do, so thank you, and I understand the obstacles. I wanted to start this by just expressing that I think we need to expand our definition or how we're looking at what civilian oversight means, because a lot of what this board does, which is great, is also reactionary. So it's looking at the worst instances of police abuse and then figuring out how we can prosecute those or bring about, you know, some sort of restitution. And I think what we need is really more of a rolling, persistent window into policing so we can catch trends and bias. So, you know, is an officer typically stopping people, men of color, doing this? So what I've come up with and what I've been brainstorming on social media and with some people is an idea that centers around body-worn cam footage, and just wanted to get your insight into what you guys have been asking for, because I think this is something, particularly in this climate, that you might be able to get achieved. So what I would love is maybe there to be a subset within your committee that maybe it's, you know, citizens who are elected, but they're civilians, and it might be sort of like a what we do with jury duty, where people serve a certain amount of time. But basically, could you guys potentially ask for a secondary server that is an exact mirror, a carbon copy of what the police have when in terms of when officers are uploading their footage? Because right now, what you're doing is you're sending these requests, waiting 10 days, three months, however long, to then begin an investigation. What I would think, especially now, you could ask for is to ask for a copy that your team has access to at all times. You know, when we're talking about reallocating the policing budget, hire out a particular task force that is devoted to looking at a random selection of footage daily, maybe a certain number of hours per week, so that officers know that they have the potential of, you know, being the subject of a random screening, similar to what we do in drug tests. That could encourage more of a, you know, a sustained, oh, there is this watchful eye. I have to be held accountable because civilians are understanding that they see me. In addition, you know, if we can kind of levy this into career advancement for officers. So when a particular officer is tapped for a promotion, if that would then trigger within the board a requirement that they have to review that particular officer's footage to understand how do you interact with the public, not just what's on your record, but do you know how to de-escalate situations? Do you have any noticeable trends of bias? And if you guys could then put out a public written, just expression of what you believe that officer's qualifications are, I think that would really help. So my question is, with the repeal of 50A, do you think that you could ask for this sort of secondary instance that you could have a more proactive view into this sort of data?
Thank you. John, Nicole, and I'll make a comment, but let me let you guys speak first if you want to address this.
So I think the problem lies that the charter gives us jurisdiction over individual cases. And so we would have to work out an agreement with the department to get the wider access to all body-worn camera footage. I think it's something that makes a lot of sense. As you were speaking, I was thinking, I wonder if this guy needs a job. But both sides, when we agreed to the MOU, there were things that we achieved that we were very happy about, and there were things that we did not achieve, and that's a compromise. So like I understand that there may be systems that work better than what we have, hopefully we'll get set up soon. But to your answer about who is monitoring body-worn camera on the regular basis, I believe the police department has set up a system where they spot check a certain amount of, I guess they call it audit because they're fancy. They audit a certain number of body-worn camera recordings per week per command to ensure that people are complying with the regulations around body-worn cameras and also what they're doing on that on the recordings.
Thanks, John. Any other comments from board members? Anyone else? I would say that often the policy department looks at trends, things that we are seeing that continue to recur, and communicates that in various ways to the department. So it is to say that it's not just reactive, but there's an effort to actually influence how the department actually both trains officers and disciplines them as well. Next speaker.
Thank you so much. So next we have Justin Agramonte, followed by Nicole Palencia and Nicole Aversa.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Members, the youth who spoke before me, and all presenters and speakers who were also eloquent and just inspire me, and I know others. I would like to speak about something that hopefully the CCRB is able to in some way influence as touching other actors or be able to influence themselves with the power that they have. Specifically, I'd like to speak about something that I'm sure the youth have even heard on social media, which is reinvestment of the budget allocated to NYPD to other programs, especially community programs. In a study labeled Freedom to Thrive, Reimagining Safety and Security in Our Communities, the Communities United for Police Reform, a campaign to end discriminatory policing practices in New York, which brought together a movement of community members, lawyers, researchers, and activists, estimated that with the $100 million that is essentially the cost associated with hiring a proposed 10,000 new police officers, they could fund programs for the youth, which why I'm bringing this up to the relevancy of the youth that spoke before, and fund programs such as after-school programs, which would cost about $13.6 million, or summer youth program, which would cost under $100 million. The reason I bring this up is because these are programs that give people, and especially youth, who don't have so many opportunities that other children have, those opportunities to branch out and diversify places that they might not be able to touch, such as the arts, or programs that are typically extracurricular. We've seen it before, that these schools get budget cuts to their art programs and students are just left with the bare minimum. But I believe that with this reinvestment strategy, part of these programs can not only touch the schools, but it also can just be reallocated to the community as a whole. I'd like to finish with a question specifically about the youth report and CCB info distribution. Specifically, I want to touch on how non-native English speakers who are possible.
Yeah, I think you should try to do it as quickly as you can because there are other people behind you as well who want to speak.
Okay, this is my last sentence. How non-native English speakers who are most vulnerable to police misconduct and have the most trouble being able to represent themselves are able to receive the same information.
So let me just speak to the issue of police budget, reallocation, etc. We spoke to that earlier, and I made a personal comment about being supportive of the position that the commissioner and the mayor have taken about looking at the department's budget and redirecting some of those resources toward youth-related and perhaps other types of social service programs. I also made the personal statement earlier that I believe that it maybe even greater or more in-depth could be taken at the budget to make sure that there aren't activities that the NYPD is doing that could be better done someplace else, and that those activities be moved out of the department and funded through the appropriate agencies of the city. A lot of debate and discussion coming on that one. As to non-English speakers and the NYPD and investigations, John or someone else from the staff, do you want to speak to
that? With regard to non-English speakers, first we try and hire as diverse a staff as possible to make sure that we have people who can speak as many languages as possible on staff. But in New York City, with over 200 languages, that's just not possible. And so we have access to language lines to provide translation services and interpretive services.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments, questions on this one or any other? All right, thank you, Justin. Next speaker.
And I misspoke. It's not Nicole. It's Noel Palenska.
Noel.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. My name is Noel Ramo Plasencia. I'm a college student here in Queens. And I would like to talk more about filing complaints and the issue with so-called instances of he said, she said complaints. I'd like to point out that there would be no burden of proof on a complaint for either party if the NYPD was transparent with the body cam footage. The New York Police Department and state legislators should promote public transparency over police body camera footage by establishing policies that require the use of body cameras and dashboard cameras by police departments, require all body camera footage to be accessible for review by the Civilian Review Board, and stored unless specifically requested not to. Notify civilians who have been recorded by police body cameras that they have the right to remain anonymous if they choose. Allow civilians to have full access to body camera footage of themselves or their family members. Require for police officers to provide evidence when denying a freedom of information request for body or dash cam footage, and determine whether footage has been tampered with or is missing as a negative evidentiary factor in criminal and administrative proceedings. Other policies that should be implemented include preventing the use of facial recognition software in conjunction with body camera footage to identify and create databases on civilians, and to prohibit officers from reviewing footage before completing initial reports and interviews of incidents. They should also ban officers from confiscating cell phones and other recording devices without the owner's consent or without a warrant. And they should punish officers who wrongfully confiscate or destroy a citizen's recording devices. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Noel. Any questions or comments from my colleagues on the board or staff?
I just wanted to say quickly, like, body worn camera footage is very important, and we work hard to get it. But we are also seeing in complaints other camera footage, and our investigators are great at getting security camera footage, any kind of camera footage that's available. We are also seeing that in complaints, and that's very helpful, as well as seeing New Yorkers and anybody who's a complainant or someone that's just observed something that they think is inappropriate, taking out their camera and filming it and getting that footage as well. So we have a public that is taking agency in taking initiative to make recordings themselves, and that is also playing a role in increasing the number of substantiations that we're able to make. And you know, I agree with John. I will add too that the burden of proof is not on the complainant, but it is on us as CCRB in making a recommendation for discipline that we are able to substantiate it to the level that we feel comfortable, and that is preponderance of the evidence standard.
Thank you, Corinne. Any other comments? I would just reiterate that body-worn camera footage is extremely important to the work that the agency does. And as John Darsh pointed out earlier, with body-worn camera footage, we do substantiate at a higher rate and close cases on the merits at a higher rate. But I also agree with Corinne. This new technology helps us shine a light on and increase transparency in policing. People should take it upon themselves to record interactions if they choose to. They should be careful not to interfere with what's going on. And then officers have an obligation, and I think there's attempt at some legislation around this, not to interfere with people who are recording. And I think there are too many instances of that we need to continue to address. And we need to make sure that the officers turn on their body-worn camera footage as required.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make clear to everyone that the CCRB does investigate members of service who interfere with civilians' recording police interactions, and that is considered an abuse of authority.
Thank you, Mr. Darsh. Other comments? The next speaker then?
So the next speaker is Nicole Aversa. She has some Wi-Fi issues, so I'm going to ask her question for you. It might be outside of our bounds, but I wanted to respect your question. Can you please explain to me more what exactly the funding of the NYPD/police department exactly means? Although there is a movement now to dismantle the police due to recent and past acts, what repercussions will this movement of funds have to public safety?
Yeah, I think that we have sort of dealt with that now. This might be the third or fourth time. Maybe the recording here or the transcript from the minutes from the meeting we can share with that questioner. Unless the board members have some comments or questions, I'm going to go to the next speaker. All right, next speaker, please.
All right, next we have Malcolm Hill. After that, we have Mariah Young and Rosalia Diaz.
Malcolm, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and also thank you to the youth. It was very informative and inspiring, as others have said. And I'm sorry, my dog is barking in the background. My main question is, from everything you've shared, it seems like you guys are really hamstrung in a number of ways. I understand from your website you have a $15 million budget. The NYPD has close to a $6 billion budget. I understand that the NYPD, in some cases, is slow walking their compliance with their agreement to supply body camera footage, refusing to be interviewed virtually while other agencies are doing that. And I've learned today that many of the rules that you're enforcing are written by the NYPD for the NYPD in the patrol guidebook. So despite what I'm sure is your sincere effort, it seems like there's a lot of systematic obstacles that your work faces. And I would like to know from you guys, who should civilians and others who think that that's not right contact to see that some of those changes happen so that you can do your work even better?
I'll take a stab, and then I'll ask my colleagues both on the staff and on the board. I think on the big picture, when it comes to resources, it's public officials, it's the city council, and city hall, and the mayor's office to some degree. I think advocating for full funding for the CCRB with public officials is really extremely important. In some ways, the agency takes a look at systemic issues and comments on them and how changes might be made through our policy reports and other measures. The staff does it one-on-one, but clearly more needs to be done. And you're right, it is kind of a David and Goliath relationship, but we persevere. And I think that we won. I'm sorry, John?
David won.
David did indeed. And we're gonna persevere and continue to try to represent the civilians of this city as a civilian complaint review board to hear their allegations against officers and adjudicate them within the jurisdiction that we have as best we can. And we're going to continue to work on resources to allow us to do that, and changes at the department that are more responsive to this relationship, but also more responsive to the citizens of the city. Any other comments, board members? Mr. Rivadeneira.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to piggyback on your comment about in terms of some of the systemic barriers that we have, and funding being one of them. Yes, definitely reach out to the council members, because they're the ones who control the budget negotiations with the mayor and his administration. But we recently saw a change up in Albany with legislation around 50A, and a majority of the board here did support a repeal of 50A, but that couldn't be done without members of the public reaching out to their state legislators as well. So please reach out to your state legislators when you see that there is room for change in policy. They are listening right now, and hopefully we can see some of these barriers removed.
Thank you, Mr. Rivadeneira. Other comments? All right. Thank you, Malcolm. And our next, was that, no, I think so. Our next speaker.
So next we'll be hearing from Mariah Young, followed by Rosalina Diaz and James Yates.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can indeed.
All right, so thank you for having me. I'm an African-American, proud Queens resident, and I wanted to speak about community involvement and police oversight. I'm speaking for many people in my community and others as well. As a frustrated citizen, the community feels very fervent about a lot of different policy solutions for the police department during this crucial time, such as the banning of chokeholds, mandating that officers expend all forms of non-lethal use of force on suspects, the firing of all police officers found to have used excessive force or covering their badges, giving the public access to officers' records, and mandating that all police officers give civilians their name, badge number, and reason for the stop after proceeding through their regular stop procedures. And these are only a few policy solutions of many that need to be heard in an effort to stop the unnecessary killing of people. Also, I wanted to bring up some concerns of the people that feel as if the Civilian Complaint Review Board should have more authority that will actually make the people feel as if they're being represented and heard. Your board should be actively auditing policies and practices of the NYPD so that we can ultimately, prevent police misconduct complaints in the first place. It shouldn't take a complaint to compel an investigation of whether there are broader policy decisions or unwritten practices that lead to police misconduct and the targeting of people of color. And the community also wonders if the memorandum of understanding is enough when it comes to the authority that you guys have with these investigations. We believe that the head of police needs to be bound by the independent factual investigation of the Civilian Review Board and bound by a possible given range of punishments included by the Civilian Review Board when disciplining officers that are found guilty of misconduct. But yeah, that's all, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I will say that a number of people are working, advocates and others are working diligently to always increase the authority and of the agency to do its work and its jurisdiction. And it's a worthy task, and we should all stay with it. But thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next, we'll be hearing from Rosalina.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm a CUNY faculty person, and I'm here this evening advocating for a group of students called the Environmental Action Lab. And so this is their concern, their question. They've been doing some work in the Brooklyn area. They're testing soil and doing local cleanups in the railroad, by the railroad tracks in Brooklyn. And they've had 3 interactions with police officers where they've been asked, initially they were scared away by the police. During the second interaction, they were told it was okay when the student introduced themselves and spoke about what it was that they were trying to accomplish. And then the third time, when it was two girls of color, they were told to leave and that they shouldn't be there, that they needed some kind of permit or whatever. So the students have reached out to assembly and council members in the vicinity to try to ask for what it is that they need in order to be able to do the work that they're doing, which, by the way, they get no funding for. So this is a group of students that are out there trying to clean up the community with the eventual goal of starting a food forest and then a sustainable actions for environmental actions for the community. So what do they need to do? What do they need in order to be able to do this work without being harassed by police? Are there council members or assembly people that they should be speaking to? So that's basically those are my questions. Who should they go to? What can they be? What paperwork do they need in order to be able to do this work?
I'll take a stab at this and just make a suggestion, and then I would ask my colleagues, again, both staff and board members to comment. But I would say it could be useful for the students and whoever their faculty sponsor is to arrange a conversation with the local precinct about the work that the student's doing so that the local precinct is aware, makes all the officers aware, and then this becomes less of an issue. That would be my first thought, but I open it up to my colleagues to see if they have other suggestions. Right, so that would be what I would suggest, and I think whoever the local council person is, I'm sure that they would be willing with students and their faculty sponsor, just the students, to ensure that a conversation can happen with the precinct and this can be sorted through. The neighborhood coordinating officer would be one good person also to have a conversation with about this, so that the precinct knows what this activity is.
Chair Davey, can I that I think if you believe that you have witnessed police misconduct with police interacting with these young people as a witness, you can also file a complaint with the CCRB. And I would implore all our speakers who have witnessed or experienced police misconduct who are speaking with us today to also file a complaint with the CCRB. We will put the link to file a complaint in the chat for all participants, but you can file on our website or call our number directly or call 311.
Thank you, Aria. Very good point.
And I would just join with the chair's recommendation to make an appointment with the NCO. But I would also suggest that, and I don't know all the specifics of this piece of land, but if this is a CUNY-sponsored activity, to give the students letters that they could carry with them explaining that the students are engaged in a project, because it's always possible the one officer who will show up on a given day will be the officer who didn't get the message about this, so that they can take out a letter and show the person this is part of our academic activity, and that could be of great assistance. So often these things are just a matter of people haven't communicated with each other on both sides.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Other comments from board members or staff? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next we have James Yates.
Mr. Yates, I think we know you. Are you there? I think you might be on mute.
We'll go on and see if he comes back. So next we have Audra Jones.
Is the speaker there? Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, also efforts. I'm just really becoming aware of the work of the CCRB and reading statistics and being going over your website. It's really heartening that we do have a committee of citizens who are attempting to oversee the work of the police. I was a witness to countless instances of police brutality over the past 10 days, beginning at Barclays Center on May 29th. I can say with complete confidence that the police force is out of control. I don't think that they're the least bit fearful or threatened by the CCRB. I don't think that they're in the least bit fearful or threatened by wearing body cams, which most of them did not have on. They covered their name tags. They indiscriminately grabbed teenagers, visibly teenagers, young people, black and brown primarily, and beat them with their sticks within 1 second of encountering them. The police are out of control. I'm concerned as a citizen and New Yorker from birth, 50 years now, 20 years in Brooklyn, how the CCRB really has authority and force behind it. I don't think you're big enough. I don't think you're funded enough. Looking at the statistics, it's disheartening to see that a body of citizens that could have so much power has very little power, with all due respect to all of your work. I'm concerned that the police act as a blind force of zombies, just witnessing their behavior. They're not intimidated by any of us. So yes, defund, dismantle, renew. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments.
With the CCRB, I've been contacted by 2 investigators. That interaction so far has been encouraging. Yeah, so I will report to you all.
Well, as I think we said at the top of the meeting, we have a commitment to investigating all of those complaints fully and fairly, and any others that come the way of the agency. I would agree with you. We can always use more money. I do think that some additional authority is warranted as well. But those are conversations that we'll continue to pursue for some time to come. But thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
We're going to go back to James.
Go ahead.
James?
Mr. Yates, are you there? All right,
we'll move on to Audra Jones. Oh, sorry, Ilya Fridman.
Is a speaker there?
Ilya, there's a little bit of an echo.
And by the way, we're like all vacation. All the marketing people are like we're on vacation. Nothing's changed. Nothing. All of our agencies got bonus during COVID. Bonus so that they would keep their teams and not fire them. Our team members and keeping our businesses intact. I'm like, so who's figuring out the new customer journey that's getting a shitload of money to put up like plexiglass on products and whatever, and they're like,
I'm sorry, we can't make this speaker out. Soren, let's silence the mic. Let's see if we can get back to that speaker and figure out what the technical issues are. And let's go to the next speaker.
Ilya, thank you so much. We couldn't hear you, so I'm going to call you back. I'm going to call you back and unmute you in just a second after the next speaker and see if we can fix those audio problems. So next we have Kathleen Betty.
The speaker there.
Hi, good evening. We spoke earlier about accountability, and I see some data on your site about discipline rates when the police commissioner makes a final disciplinary decision, but I'm curious to know the rate at which the police commissioner follows your policy recommendations in general over a period of, let's say, 5 years. In addition to that question, I'm wondering if you're set up to work with volunteers, and if not, do you think it's possible to remedy the hurdles that prevented you from being able to use them in the past? My last question is the CCRB funded 100% through city funds? And if not, what are the other sources?
So John, do you want to answer those?
So with regard to the volunteers, we have worked with interns, some who are paid, some who have gotten credit. And there have been conversations with law firms about having pro bono services provided. I think there may be legal difficulties about volunteers with the different collective bargaining agreements, and we'd have to look into it. I'm not opposed to it on its face. It's more complicated than just saying come on down and putting you to work. With regard to the concurrence rates with the commissioner upholding our recommendations, it is, I don't have those numbers for 5 years, but I had them a minute ago.
John, it's Nicole. I can jump in with the stats.
Sure, Nicole.
So in 2019, which is the most recent year that we have available data, and we can go back 5 years if you'd like to follow up as well. For non-charges cases, there was a 51% discipline concurrence rate, meaning 50.
Can you get closer to your computer and just speak a little louder?
Better?
Yes.
Okay. So in 2019, there was a 51% discipline concurrence rate for cases in which there were no charges recommended, discipline or training or instructions. 28% of the time there was a discipline difference, meaning there was some discipline given, but less than what was recommended. 15% of the time there was no discipline given. For our APU cases, last year there was a discipline concurrence of 32%, meaning those are the cases in which what was given was the penalty that was requested by our APU prosecutors. In situations in which there was a difference in discipline, 30% of those cases were cases in which the officer was found not guilty by the trial commissioner. That's the largest category. In some cases, 20% of the time, the penalty was lower than what was requested at trial, which sometimes happens when some allegations are found not guilty while officers have others substantiated by the trial commission. And we have a lot of data available via the website, and also for kind of more in-depth conversations about these data, again, feel free to email me at policy@ccrb.nyc.gov.
Thank you, Nicole. And concurrence rates continue to be an issue, and it is one of the arguments that is being made about sort of final authority. So it's one we'll continue to work on. But thank you for your question and your comments. Next speaker, please.
We're going to try Ilya Friedman one more time.
Right. Ilya, are you there?
Whereas we could be paying ourselves, you know? Is it
Ilya?
Ilya? Let's.
Okay. So we're going to move on to next. We have Eileen Grench.
Hi. I just had a quick question. Considering what seems to be from your last report, the 40% of pending body-worn camera requests that are older than 90 days, agency, or if the department can get you body-worn camera footage for recent cases in an expedited way, what is keeping them from getting you footage for the backlog cases? And then, especially without, I know that you guys said that you have not been able to implement the MOU yet, but why can't they help you? And then also additionally, what about COVID keeps the police department from creating this room?
John? Mr. Darsh, are you there?
Yes. So the contractors who would be setting up the room, and our staff and the civilian staff who would be working on implementing the MOU are not in the office. So we have chosen a room that is actually on the same floor as the current CCRB for the initial secure room, so that it would be convenient for our staff to be able to go and view video. So we finally agreed on a location after much negotiation, and then the pandemic occurred, and it put a halt to a lot of our plans. With regard to the backlog, much of the unit that provides us with the body-worn camera footage was either the civilians were not in the office and working from home, or the uniformed members of the service had been deployed because of manpower shortages due to illness from the pandemic. Just as we were about to get back moving again, a protest occurred and the department shifted their manpower again so that people were working 12-hour shifts with no days off, which made it tough for us to work with folks who were, instead of being able to do their normal work, were elsewhere. I'm hopeful that we can resume member of service interviews on the week of the 22nd, and that we'll be able to start reviewing body-worn camera footage much sooner than that on these current cases, because I feel like the events of the last 10 days are not, these are the type of events that the CCRB was created for. The Tompkins Square Park riots that resulted in the movement that successfully pushed for the creation of the CCRB. This is a similar situation that we're seeing now. And so the agency is making a effort to prioritize these cases, to move swiftly on these cases. With regard to body-worn camera footage, if we didn't move the current cases to the front, we would probably have a backlog, and there's going to be a backlog, but I'm hopeful we'll be able to promptly and effectively investigate these cases and get them to the board soon.
Thank you, Mr. Josh. Any comments, questions from the board members? All right, should we go to our next speaker?
Okay, next we have Vincent Riggins, and then we'll try Aaliyah one more time.
Okay, good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening.
Alrighty. Thank you guys once again for doing this awesome work. Every avenue that the citizens have to share their apprehensions and thoughts about policing and justice is a blessing and a pleasure. I believe that someone asked my question in regards to how many recommendations that you make to the commissioner for disciplining of officers, and I believe she just answered that question. So my question would be, if she answered it, you don't have to, but if she did not, you could elaborate. But my other question is, will the repeal of Civil Rights Law 58 assist you in your future investigations?
I'll take a stab at that. I'll ask other board members comment. What it will allow us to do is to provide more information to the complainant and the victim about the outcome of these cases, which is something we've not been able to do, and not to the degree that we should. And allow us to put in the context for people why the decisions were reached, which is also something that 50A hindered the agency from doing. But I'll let staff and other board members come in as well. If they want to.
The most important thing that will happen is that the public will be able to look at the information that we have and the decisions that the board makes and that the department has made after the board sends them cases, and to determine whether or not justice was done. And that will help public focus their efforts on how to reform things or whether they need to be reformed at all. Any
other comments from board members? Thank you, speaker. Next speaker.
We're going to try Ilya.
The one model. The clients, they're like, they have a tool, when you need this thing, you connect with everyone, and we're like,
Sorry about that. Maybe you can send us an email with that question. I'll provide my email in the chat. So the last speaker that we have is Margaret McElliott.
Great. Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone on the CCRB, and especially thanks to the Youth Advisory Council for the great presentation and for your participation in the meeting today. I was really struck by the similarities between the experiences that you reported in the June 8th report of what youth have been enduring in New York with what so many of us have been seeing in the last 10 days. In terms of NYPD's, but at a very high rate of NYPD criminal assault and violations of New Yorkers' constitutional rights. And it seems not just, again, not just handfuls, but dozens and hundreds of officers who don't seem to know what the law is or what the constitutional violations they're committing even are. And then it becomes clear from the response of NYPD leadership and the Police Benevolent Association of both New York City and New York State that they defend this behavior and this criminal style of policing. So I just wanted to reach out to the folks on the Youth Advisory Council who contributed to the report and contribute their expertise to the conversation, that I think even if there's a lot of New Yorkers who are focused right now on the budget, a lot of New Yorkers who are focused right now on accountability around these most recent crimes, that the larger conversation about, why aren't there more dismissals of police officers who do this repeatedly? What are the structural things that need to change? That's going to take time, but it's entirely possible through both budgetary pressure and electoral pressure of more and more people who are pointing to all the similarities in these experiences with the police to be able to create systemic change that lasts. And it will take time, but with your guidance and more New Yorker support, we can get it done. So just thanks so much for your service and appreciate this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anyone, board members, staff?
Yes, I would love to respond.
Sure. Is that Haria?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for your comments. And I do agree with you and want to take this opportunity to point out 2 of our report, which starts on page 38, really highlights youth voices that were at the Youth Summit. They had a lot of suggestions and solutions of their own, more systemic solutions, focusing on counselors, focusing on they would like to see money being spent. And so we have tried to memorialize that, but definitely it is a conversation that we continue to have with our Youth Advisory Council members. And for everyone who's on this call, actually, please look out in early fall, around September is when our application goes up for the next class of the Youth Advisory Council. So if you know young New Yorkers ages 10 to 24, we highly encourage them to apply, and we look forward to seeing their applications.
Thank you, Haria. It's extremely helpful. Thank you so much. I think we are at the end of the speakers, public speaking session, and Mr. Joseph.
Okay, now I'm ready. Speaking about the Youth Advisory Council, earlier on there was a question about the PSA, and I think the question was whether it was available in languages other than English, and what were those languages and where was it found?
You hire or Jared?
So on staff, we have folks that obviously are multilingual. With the for presentations, I think previously they were asking about that. We'd be happy to conduct presentations in whatever language folks request, and we can have that translation. In regards to the PSA, we only have it closed captioned and in English. But yeah, that would be something that we would consider moving forward.
Chair, I forgot to answer one question that kind of relates to this, which was about our funding. The agency is normally 100% funded by city levies, but for the Youth Advisory Council, we received charitable contributions from several sources, including the NYU McSilver Institute last year, who was a co-host for the event, and Chair, could you tell who all the contributors were?
Sure. We also had the Pinkerton Foundation, and then also NYU Law School, their Institute on Race. I'm forgetting the rest of the acronym, but they also contributed to us, as well as Union Theological Seminary also contributed.
And I don't know how that last contribution actually got to the program, but I'm glad it did. I was going to say this is a good place for the CCRB and community groups who represent different constituencies whose primary language is not English might work together to identify both public and private sources to support translations, closed caption translations of the PSA. So we should have more conversations about that as well. Any other comments from board members? Is there any old business to come before the board? Any new business to come before the board? Is there then a motion to adjourn to executive session?
Motion made to adjourn to executive session.
Is there a second? I'm going I'm going to just make a comment, and that is I want to thank everybody again for the way in which they performed so well in the midst of a set of circumstances none of us could have imagined even 3 months ago, or maybe even 2.5 months ago. But the resiliency and the commitment have made an enormous difference. And so I want to thank the staff of the CCRB. I want to thank this board. And I want to thank others that we've worked with to help this agency continue to do the work that it does. Hearing no objections to having made and seconded a motion, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion is passed. We are adjourned to executive session. Thank you. And